Alright, my lovelies, we're actually heading back to Massachusetts for our next case. We're going to be talking about the case of Jesse Pomeroy. Now, this is an oldie, but I hope you guys enjoy because this is some nuts shit. Yeah, some nuts stuff. So Jesse Pomeroy was born in Charlestown. So I say Charleston, but it's actually Charlestown. So Charleston, Massachusetts, and he was born to Thomas J. Pomeroy and Ruth Ann Snowman. And he was the second child, so he was the youngest. His older brother, Charles, was 2 years older than him. And his father was a veteran of the U.S. Civil War. Yeah, so there was some reported attacks that happened in 1871 to 1872. And yeah, these attacks were specifically made on young boys who were enticed to remote areas and attacked by a slightly older boy. Now, nobody was arrested for these attacks because they just didn't. And these attacks were noteworthy because of the extreme amount of brutality that was used by the assailant. The young boys were beaten with somebody's fist in a belt. And in at least 2 of these attacks, a knife was used. So some of these boys were physically scarred by these attacks. Like, they were permanently physically scarred. So in 1872, Ruth and the 2 children, they moved to South Boston. Pomeroy's attacks on young boys continued. He would be arrested. He would finally be arrested, and his case would be heard in front of a juvenile court judge. Pomeroy would be found guilty and sentenced to a state reformatory school for boys, and this was in Westboro, Mass, for his minority. So basically until he turned 18, he would be there. Woo. The Boston Globe did cover this case, and the last line on the article is basically, it says it generally concluded that the boy is mentally deficient. So he didn't stay at the reformatory school for very long. In February of 1874, I don't know why I giggle at these things. I just because the whole way that we deal with criminals is just, I don't get it. I don't get it, people. All right, so in 1874, at the age of 14, Jesse would be sent back to his mother and his brother in South Boston. Yeah, they would be paroled. He would be paroled and sent back. So his mother, she ran her own dressmaking shop in South Boston, and his brother sold newspapers. So, I mean, they had means of income. They were okay, especially without his dad being present. Yeah. So in March of 1874, this is when a 10-year-old girl named Katie Curran went missing. And she was from South Boston as well. So on the 22nd of April of 1874, the mutilated body of a 4-year-old named Horace Millen was found on the marsh of Dorchester Bay. Immediately, police tried to find Pomeroy. Immediately. Despite having evidence implicating him in the crime, like, they just went after him anyway. So the body of Katie Curran would be found later, and she would be found in the basement of Pomeroy's mother's dress shop. Her remains were hastily and carelessly concealed in an ash heap. So literally she was just kind of like thrown, and the ash was just put on top of her. There she is. So, why? If you're going to dispose of a body, do it the right way. Right? Anywho. So, because of her being found in the basement, Pomeroy was also taken to view Horace Millen's body and asked if he committed the murder. And so at the coroner's inquest, Pomeroy denied the right of counsel. So basically he refused it. So the case of Commonwealth versus Pomeroy was heard in the Supreme Judicial Court in Suffolk County, Boston. And this was heard on two days, December 9th and December 10th of 1874. And at the trial, the Attorney General argued for a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree. And in his closing arguments is when he urged an alternative charge of murder with extreme atrocity, which, according to Massachusetts law, in the first degree murder, but differs from it's first degree murder, but it differs because the original charge, it requires premeditation, whereas the murders of Jesse were very vicious and violent. There was no premeditation. He just kind of grabbed a victim. That's why So Pomeroy was found guilty on the 10th of 1874 he was found guilty with the recommendation of mercy on account of his youth. So because he was so young, there's some mercy behind it. So Pomeroy's attorney, Charles Robinson, he filed 2 exceptions which were overruled in February of 1875, at which point Pomeroy was sentenced to death by hanging. So after his trial, it remained that the governor had to sign the death warrant and assign a date for his execution. However, Governor William Gaston refused to comply with the execution responsibility. He didn't want that on his name. The only legal means of sparing Pomeroy's life was through the Massachusetts Governor's Council, and only if a simple majority of a 9-member council voted to commute the death penalty. And over the next year and a half, the council voted 3 different times, and the first 2 votes upheld his execution. Both times the governor refused to sign his death warrant. So in August of 1876, the council took a 3rd vote, and anonymously, Pomeroy's sentence was commuted to life in prison in solitary confinement. So on the evening of September 7th of 1876, Pomeroy was transferred from Suffolk County Jail to the state prison in Charleston. And this is where he began his life in solitary. He was 16 at the time. Pomeroy would continue to stay incarcerated at the Charleston State Prison. So in prison, this is when Pomeroy claimed to have taught himself how to read several foreign languages, including Hebrew, and one psychiatrist found that he had learned German he was very accurate with his German words. He wrote poetry. He argued with prison officials over his right to have his poetry published. He studied law books. He spent decades composing legal challenges to his conviction and requests for pardon. A psychiatrist wrote a report about Pomeroy in 1914 and quoted it, literally extensively quoted the Boston Globe after his death, noted that Pomeroy had made 10 to 12 determined attempts to escape, and that handmade tools were frequently found in his possession. So a prison warden reported finding a rope, steel pens, and a drill that Jesse had concealed in his cell or on himself. And according to the Globe, Jesse lost an eye after attempting to destroy the side of his cell, and this was after he tried to redirect a gas pipe. So that same psychiatric report also claimed that Jesse had shown a great ingenuity and persistence, which is unprecedented in the history of prison. In 1917, with the support of the DA, Joseph Pelletier, Pomeroy's sentence was commuted to the extent of allowing him privileges afforded to other life prisoners. At first, he resisted, wanting nothing less than a pardon, and eventually he adjusted to his circumstances and appeared in a minstrel show in prison. So in 1929, by this time, he was elderly and he was frail. He was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane, and he would remain until he died on the 29th of September in 1932. So that, my friends, is the case of Jesse Pomeroy. I wanted to cover him because if you don't know the show The Alienist, he appears in the novel, and he's been featured on the actual TV show, but he is played by Stephen Lewis Grush in the TV show. He is also been shown on Fiend, which is the shocking true story of America's youngest true serial killer. He's been shown on many different things. He's been called the boy torturer of Boston, even though he killed a girl and a boy. So it's kind of like all over the place, I guess you would say. Yeah. His crimes have been depicted but not so much with saying who it actually was. So that's why I wanted to cover Jesse Pomeroy, and I know it's an older case. It's a vintage crime case that not a lot of people are actually going to read about. So that's why I wanted to cover it, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's case. If you did, hit that like button. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever it is underneath me, because I'm socially awkward and I don't know where it is. Actually, I do. I just like doing this. And continue to support my channel. I love making videos about true crime for you guys, and I hope you guys continue watching on the 25 Days of True Crime. So, and also, if you have any recommendations for any videos, put them in the comments down below. DM me on Instagram or even on TikTok. I am Creating Crime Time, and I'll see you guys tomorrow in my new video. Bye, you guys.